What is going on, everyone? It is Tyler McKinney back here again, and today we're going to get back into the XFL. They just don't take a break. They keep coming and coming and coming with more and more information, and we've got to cover it. All right, if it's your first time here, hey, I'm glad to have you. If you're a return viewer, thanks for coming back, and thanks for watching more videos. And you know I'm going to say, yep, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it if you did. And remember, leave me those comments. I love interacting with you guys down in the comment section. And if you leave me a pretty good one, I will definitely feature it in an upcoming video. All right, so we got a lot of things coming out with the XFL. So we thought we were going to have a little bit of a lull between the end of training camp and those scrimmages up until, where they officially announce the players who are cuts in the final rosters. The final active rosters when they get down to the 52-man rosters. But it's looking like we keep getting more and more stuff with this. Now, in reference to all of the roster cuts and all that, I will be going through that stuff extensively next week when they are officially released. Now, I know that we've been getting reports of things that are coming out and that with it, but I'm going to wait until we get all of the information officially, and we'll go through, and then we'll start to break down the rosters, and we'll also go through and start to break down the different positions and where I feel like all of the players rank in the different positions. So we'll definitely be doing that, so be checking out for that stuff starting next week. Now, let's go ahead and let's start it off with a really big thing. It's not really huge news, but this is big news for the XFL. Now, we found out that the XFL is partnered with two companies, and those companies are Navigate Research and Connect Partnership Group. And pretty much what they've done with those is they partnered up with those two groups to really try to help the XFL really expand their brand and really bring in sponsorships, especially for like the local markets. And what do I mean by local markets? Well, in St. Louis, they've acquired two large sponsors. And when we're looking at that, Amerin, they're a regional energy company in the St. Louis area, and so they've pulled them on as a sponsor, and also Anheuser-Busch. They pulled them on as a sponsor as well. So it looks like this brand, these two companies are definitely bringing in the sponsorship for the XFL, and this is good to have, Anheuser-Busch on. As one of the sponsors for the XFL. It's really showing that people are not taking the XFL as just this kiddie little league. They're actually letting them out there and play with the big boys, and they're bringing in some big boy sponsorships and definitely of that type of nature. So it's really cool to see this, and it's really showing just how viable the league is starting to become and how serious people are starting to take them as a league. So to get this, not only these two sponsors, but to also partner with these groups and that to really see where the XFL is sitting, I think that's a really huge thing, and I think that it's a big thing for them with it. So I think that even though this really isn't breaking news, this is definitely just showing that the XFL has set themselves up to succeed, and bringing in sponsors like those two with a big regional energy company and Anheuser-Busch is huge. So let's go ahead and let's move on now, and let's talk about some ticket sales. And we really haven't been able to really kind of figure out where all of the ticket sales kind of stuff have been going in that with it. But it looks like we got a little tidbit. It came out of Seattle. It was kind of an interesting story. I'll definitely link it down in the description. But it's looking like Seattle, of all places, is kind of leading the charge when it comes to ticket sales, and it looks like that they've been doing exceptionally well. And they've come out and said that they're kind of the ones that are ahead of everyone else, which is kind of interesting to me. I know that they've been having a lot of support there in Seattle for this team, so I think that's definitely huge, and I've noticed that Seattle has really rallied around this team, but It just was just kind of surprising to me because St. Louis has just been on the ball since day one. I mean, that community has totally embraced this team. I mean, it's really become their team, this Battlehawks team. So just kind of, I was just kind of a little surprised by that. Not shocked, but just a little surprised that they were the one in the lead. And it's looking like, by all reports, that they could have 20,000, 26,000 people in that stadium for their opening home game. So that is huge news. Now, granted, I know that stadium holds 3 times that amount of people, but for this league, I think that's a good start off for them. And I think that it's a really, really good thing, for them with that. A good place to start. And we'll talk about the kind of the attendance and stuff like that a little bit later on, but I just wanted to touch on that it seems that ticket sales are strong, and that Seattle's leading the way. So good job for you guys, you Dragons. All right, let's move on now, and I want to hit on the Team 9. And if you haven't been following the XFL, what the Team 9 is so this past week they've been they've had to cut their 70-man rosters down to 52. Now, out of all those guys who are in the players that got cut from the rosters, what they're going to do is they're going to take about 40 of them. They're going to kind of pull about what they feel are the best 40 players, and they're going to put them on what's called this Team 9. Now, this Team 9, I think, is going to be located, if I'm not mistaken, they're going to be located, I think, in Dallas. But what they're going to be doing is they're going to be practicing as a team with the whole purpose is if somebody gets injured, or I guess if they were to cut somebody on one of the teams, that they could pull from this pool of guys who have been, who've been polished, who've been, working on their skills, who have been practicing, as opposed to hiring somebody off the street. Oliver Luck has talked about this a couple times, and he uses kind of the reference of Des Bryant. Des Bryant, it looked like, that the Saints needed somebody, so they picked up Des Bryant. Well, Des Bryant got there, and within the first day, he had an injury and he was done, just because he hadn't been out on the football field. So it's kind of keeping these guys in shape, keeping them in football shape, and that with it. So I think that's huge. Well, we found out with this Team 9 this week that they hired a coach. So they hired a head coach, which is kind of funny to me. You're a head coach and you coach literally no games. I get the whole thing. I mean, you need somebody to be running things. You need somebody to be looking at personnel. You need somebody to be working with these guys, to handling all this stuff and to doing all that. So I get that whole thing. I just find it humorous, and it's funny to me to see this with that, just because at the end of the day, he's going to be a head coach with no record. Now, granted, he's going to be an undefeated coach, but he's not going to have any wins, and he's not going to be playing for anything. So he's more like a glorified management position in that with it. But I think it's really cool. It's a neat concept, and from what I take it, it's kind of something that Oliver Luck, has kind of done. They've kind of done in the past, and that with it, and it's kind of neat because this kind of ties all of itself together. Because the coach that they hired is it's Bart Andrus, and he was a guy who he's been an offensive coordinator a whole bunch of different places and been a lot of places. But one of the places that he was in the most was NFL Europe, and he was a head coach in NFL Europe for years. Now, if you remember, Oliver Luck, ran NFL Europe. So you see the connection there with that, and so you bring this in. It's kind of an idea from NFL Europe. You've got Oliver Luck, you've got Andrus, and so you kind of put the two and two together, and bringing him in here. He's a guy. He's had experience in the CFL. He's had experience at college, at the high school level, at definitely NFL pro level, and also NFL Europe level. So he's versed in all the different styles of football, which is exactly what the XFL's doing. They're bringing in a whole bunch of different styles of football to create one style of football. So I think he's a really good guy for it, and that with it. It's not really going to mean anything because it's not going to really produce anything on the field, but it's just another one of those neat things to just show you that the XFL is thinking down the road with things. I mean, the thought process is not just, oh, we got to get this, that. No, they put the things in place to try to set themselves up to succeed and also think about different things like what if this happens, what if that happens, and contingencies and stuff, and how will those play in, and really building that up for themselves. So I think that's huge with it. And speaking of Oliver Luck, he went out and he did an interview, and you can I'm going to put a link down in the description with this, but. He talked with this, I think it's the Seattle Times, and again, I love the fact that Oliver Luck, when he does these interviews, these aren't just static interviews, right? These are interviews where he gives us really good bits of information. And so if you pay attention to these things, you'll start to get little pieces of information, and it also kind of shows you where the XFL's going with things. So let's go ahead and let's break some of this down. First thing he talks about the attendance, and he feels really good about where the attendance is at. They're talking to the Seattle Times, so obviously they're going to bring up the Seattle thing and where it came out that Seattle was leading the way. And he said he's excited to have literally 20,000 people, and he said, it could be 24, 26,000 people in that stadium and, in that lower bowl of that, of I think CenturyLink Field there. So with that, you can definitely tell that that they feel okay with where the ticket sales are at, and I think that they've been trying to do some sales of late if you've been watching kind of the websites and things like that and giving people deals to try to get more and more sales done. But right now it looks like that they're going to, he said, they feel pretty good, and it's looking like they're going to average about 10,000 people, per game with that. And so, he feels pretty good about that, which is a good thing. And one thing that really interested me was he talked about how, asked about if the XFL is going to have more scoring than the NFL. And I think that was one thing that we were surprised about when we looked at things when it came to the scrimmages, that there weren't more scoring in the scrimmages. Now, I will put a caveat out there. This is scrimmages, and these are not games. So teams are only trying things out, and they were really trying to figure things out. And when we're looking at that, Oliver Luck did touch on that, and I'm going to go off on a side tangent here, but I promise we will get right back to exactly what we're talking about. He talked about how the teams were really focusing on the 25-second clock and how that was really the main thing for them to try to figure out, to get their teams to run it efficiently. And to try to get a feel for how that was going to feel during a game. And that's what they really used a lot of their scrimmage time on when they did these, I don't know if you want to call them preseason games, whatever, scrimmages, whatever. But that's really what the teams were focusing on and trying to get down, because that was really the most difficult part, it seemed like, for the teams. Not necessarily the rule changes, but that 25-second clock as opposed to the 40-second clock. Now, let's go back to the question of, will the XFL have more scoring than the NFL? And he said, I don't think it really will. He said, I don't think you're going to notice a difference in the scoring. He goes, what we're focusing on is he makes a statement that we're focusing on we were trying to create parity when we created these teams. We really want this league to be even across the board. We want it to be down to, he said, when you get down to the last 3-4 minutes of the game, we really want these games to be within one possession. We really want to keep people's interest in the game, is what he was saying. He said that the NFL, majority of the NFL games are that way, that at the end of the game, it's a one possession game when it comes down to it. To a lot of those games are a one possession, swing one way or another. And that's what they're trying to create in the XFL. And I think that that's part of why they built, the extra try system the way they did, with a 1 point, a 2 point, and a 3 point with that. So as you're looking at that type of a thing with it, they're really trying to create that atmosphere to where it's must-watch TV, that you don't want to miss out. And they're really trying to keep the fan throughout the whole game, which I think is huge. And for them to think about that and to think about doing that, I think is a big, big thing. And the other thing too I want to touch on, and this is just my thoughts. This wasn't what Oliver Luck said. This is kind of more me looking at things. With them having a running clock and the clock being 25 seconds, I think it's going to be two things. The running clock is going to shorten the game to where they're going to have less time to play. But with the 25-second clock, they're actually going to have to run more plays to where in the end, I think they're going to get about the same amount of plays off that the NFL does. To where they're going to, but it's all going to be compressed into about 75 to probably 80, maybe 85% of the time that it would take to get the NFL in. Probably more around 70, 75% of what it takes to get the NFL in. So you're getting about the same content as the NFL, but kind of smashed in kind of a more compact way. And to do that, you've got to run those faster pace offenses and things that we've already talked about in previous videos. But when it comes to actually seeing it on the scoreboard, I kind of agree with Oliver Luck. I don't think you're going to see more scoring in the XFL than the NFL. And if you remember the AAF, we actually had less scoring in the AAF than what we really do in the NFL. I think you'll probably have somewhere between, if I'm looking at it, probably about a 15% increase in scoring scores on that. To where I think you're not gonna get any of these 17 to 10 games. I don't see you getting any of those type of games. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't see those games happening. What I do see, though, is, I think we're going to get a lot of a 31, 27, a 31s, 26, something like in those in that realm and in that nature of it. I think that you're going to see the scoring instead of the average with the NFL, in the mid 20s, for teams. I think you're probably going to see it somewhere around the 30s-ish. Like I said, about, not really much to notice anything, but I think you're probably going to get just a little bit of bump in scoring just by the nature of the game and the way that the game's set up. I think it's a really neat thing, and I think that it's a really cool way that they've done it. The last thing that that I really want to touch on that they asked him was, what were his concerns? What were the things that kept him up at night? And the main thing that really came to his mind was the weather, and just the fact that during this time of the year, the weather in DC and in New York can be unpredictable, and that they could be playing some games in some really low temperatures, and just how to combat that weather and how to deal with that weather and that weather. I thought that was a real interesting thing to me. To for him to talk about the weather, and that the weather was his main concern. Now, who knows, he might have other things on his mind, and that might just be what he was putting out there and that with it. But that's definitely been a concern on a lot of people's minds, is when you're in February and it's 10 degrees outside, or even less than that in New York, or you just had 5 inches of snow or something of that nature, or you're playing in the snow. How is that going to translate, especially when we're playing this high-powered offense type of a game, how that's going to slow these offenses down. So that was kind of a really, I think he was being honest there. And I don't think he would have given us like, blah, 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 this or blah, 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 that, and really given us like, his deep down, the things that really do keep him up at night. But I think that he's probably being truthful, that just the weather being unpredictable is really something that, he struggles with. And a lot of people that are, heads of businesses, people who are running things and that with it, the unknown really are, the factors that they can't control are really the things that do keep him up at night. So, in a way, I do agree with him. I kind of would have liked a little bit more out of him with that. Give us see a little bit more under the hood. But, that at least for them to come out and acknowledge that the weather that they know could be an issue is reassuring, meaning that they haven't just forgotten about it, but yet they've thought about it, and hopefully that they're figuring out ways to try to quote unquote combat that the best that they can. So anyways, that kind of wraps things up for kind of what we have on tap for today. There was a lot, and I really wanted to cover those things and make sure that we kind of got those out and got kind of my thoughts out with it. Now, the question is, as always, what do you think? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear it down in the comment section. You guys let me know what you think. All right, well, I know that you're busy, and I know that I'm busy, so let's get on out of here. You have a good night. Bye.